life isn't quite a straight line. And here to talk with us about what that might mean is Kurt Wunderlich from Buckingham Strategic Wealth. Kurt, welcome.
Thank you for having me again, Bump. Appreciate it. Looking forward to sharing more with what this article means and how maybe we can avoid those speed bumps in the road.
Yeah, so you obviously wrote an article about this very topic for Retirement Daily. Let's have you walk us through it.
Definitely. So really the overall focus is all about planning. And we as humans aren't very good at predicting our own futures, let alone what life will look like 20, 30, 40 years down the road. Usually if you ask someone, it's just slightly better than it is today. But what we know is that during that life, change happens. And if 2020 taught us anything, it's that unpredictable change happens. So how can you put your best foot forward and provide for yourself by having this plan in place? And then when that biggest transition in your life happens, which is usually going from an income or a paycheck to no income or no paycheck in retirement, how do you go about that to make sure A, you have enough, and then B, you're doing it in the right way so that you minimize the amount of wealth you lose to taxes over your lifetime?
All right. So the question, do I have enough? How would you go about answering that?
Definitely. So we are all about running the numbers, saying, what do you have today? Where is that money saved? What will that equate to as a potential income stream for this paycheck replacement plan? And what are those spending goals? So let's say you saved $1 million. That's great. But if you want to spend $500,000 a year in retirement, that $1 million isn't going to last very long. Simple math says 2 years. So looking at that to say, will my money last based on the goals I have? And if that's a no, or it's not a high enough probability of success for you, going through and saying, what are my other options? Can I work longer? Are there some of those wishes that we can maybe push down so that you take care of what you really need? Or what other can you say to say one person retires now, one person retires later to get the odds of success so that they're in your favor?
Right. And in terms of, you mentioned in the article, the cash flow planning that's required. What are some of the elements of that?
Definitely. So the cash flow planning is really the big key to success, because going from a paycheck where, hey, I get paid every 2 weeks or every month, or I own the business and the profits come off and go into my bank account, you now have to switch that mindset where the money you've saved and paid yourself first, plus Social Security and maybe a pension if you're a lucky one, are these now new sources of income. So converting the assets you've built to those sources. One of the big things we look at is saying, do we have diversity in savings buckets? Do you have traditional IRA money, Roth money, so that post-tax dollars, and then taxable monies, an individual account, joint account, trust account. So you have a broad band to pull from to look at the long term to say, you might be in a zero tax bracket when you first retire at 65. You're not pulling on Social Security yet. You don't have to take required minimum distributions from your IRA. Well, that might not be the smartest decision to stay in that 0% tax bracket. It's looking at the long term to say, what happens at age 70 or 72 when those other income sources are forced and kick in? Does it make sense to do Roth conversions today? Or how do we fund that lifestyle in a low-cost manner, not for a year-to-year basis, but over the lifetime?
Right. You know, it's interesting. One of your colleagues, Michael Kitces, I think has referred to finding the tax equilibrium as part of that process. Are you in that same camp?
We are. And what we see is some of these clients come in and we run these projections for them because we're all about running those numbers. And they actually are in a higher tax bracket because they've done so well at paying themselves first. And they were high earners. That Social Security is pretty large when it's a couple. They're in that higher tax bracket at age 72 than they were at age 65 at the end of their career. So really being able to smooth those tax brackets, going to that equilibrium, like you said.
Right. And you mentioned in the article the importance of timing and how critical that is. Care to expand on that?
Yeah. So timing is a big thing, because when you're in retirement, you can't just say, I'm going to work overtime and get more money. You have to really plan out these cash flows. So if that goal has a beach house, bigger vacation, etc., that's above and beyond what your typical income sources are, we want to start taking that money early. So maybe planning 2, 3, 4 years in advance so that you can fill up a tax bracket, such as a 24% tax bracket, as opposed to saying, well, I need X number of dollars this year. And in order to achieve that goal in that 1 year, you would have to go into a 32 or higher percent tax bracket. So it's about building those assets in the most tax efficient manner possible, as opposed to saying, hey, I need it, let's go. Because as we know, when you rush into something, price isn't as big a concern. It's about getting that. So how do we help you get there and lose the least amount of wealth or least amount of taxes?
Right. So a lot of the trend in America right now is many people are retiring with debt, with mortgage debt, credit card debt, HELOCs, et cetera. Thoughts about that?
Yeah. So we really like to focus on paying off that debt before retirement. But obviously, with what the cost of a mortgage is today in a sub 3% environment, and for the long time, it's been sub 4% on a 30-year mortgage, it's looking at what's the expected return of your portfolio. What is the guaranteed cost of that debt? Because debt doesn't change if you're in a fixed rate mortgage, and saying what is the best situation for you. Typically, we see with retirees, they're in a slightly less aggressive portfolio, and it usually makes sense to actually pay off that debt faster than it does to keep that money invested, because you have a guarantee of paying that money off and getting that expected return of 4% versus the expected return of a stock market of 8 or 10%, which can fluctuate greatly, as from your lifetime, is it can be up 30%, but it also can be down 40%, or it can do both in the same year.
Yes, we talked to one of your colleagues, Doug Buchan, about this very topic just a little bit ago, actually, the variability of returns. So what about charitable giving? A lot of folks in retirement like to donate cash, but you think that may not be the best way to go about it?
Our slogan is cash is the most expensive way to give. So how can we go about giving? And luckily, there are ways to do it in retirement. So if you are in a required minimum distribution stage of life, so post 72 at this point, you can actually take money from your IRA directly. That's known as a qualified charitable distribution, and send that check directly to the charity. So that way it bypasses the income that you'd be taking if you took it out. Like, let's say you're a 30% tax bracket and you need $1,000 for a charity. You can just send the check straight from your IRA to the charity for $1,000. It doesn't come up as income on your portfolio, and you save $300. Because otherwise, if you took the money out and then donated it to charity, you would have to pay taxes on that distribution. That's where we see the best idea is. Or when you're looking pre-retiree and you know that you want to have charitable intent, giving larger donations to maybe a donor advised fund, or bunching gifts when your income is higher, so that when you do have that low income, you have this donor advised fund available to still give money to. That way the charities are the same, but you have the most tax advantage part of it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Anything that that you haven't touched on that you'd like to, or anything that you've touched on that you'd like to reemphasize before we wrap up?
We really hit home on avoiding that tax consequence of each year thinking, and really look long term, because you have maybe the crazy uncle at a party pre-COVID that just talked about, hey, I didn't pay any money in federal taxes last year. Well, that's great, but that might create a snowball where they're paying more taxes over their lifetime. And our whole goal is to help our clients lose the least amount of wealth over their lifetime.
Kurt, want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom about this topic, and writing for Retirement Daily, and doing these videos with us. That's greatly appreciated.
Bob, appreciate it. Looking forward to more.